And when you're ready. Okay.
Great. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our college panel night for juniors and families. We're super excited. Where should I be looking, by the way? Over
right,
here.
right there.
Oh, okay. Hi. We're super excited to have this presentation tonight. We have reps from different colleges here to speak to you. We have a variety of questions we're going to ask them, and they will take time to answer them and provide you with information about topics about the application process, about campus life, and all sorts of things. So we have a few announcements before we get started. I'm going to let Russ take over.
So I'm Russ Aceto. I'm the Fairbanks House Counselor. It's the first time I've kind of done it from this perspective, and I'm realizing that I probably need to do what my dad does and comb my hair forward. So for students and families, I just want to make sure everybody is aware that ad drop is happening. Ad drop is happening virtually this week. There was a survey sent out on Monday by Rye Hoffman. Students are encouraged to complete the survey. That way you can avoid the crush of the lines next week. Part of the reason for doing this is to kick off the opportunity for school counselors and juniors to meet starting in semester 2. There have been some of those meetings that have happened throughout kind of the end of semester 1 after the senior process was complete around November 1st and November 15th. But we're looking to start meeting with juniors to kind of follow up on this kickoff meeting, start doing some college searching, maybe start talking about some essays or application support. And speaking of essays, every junior is in either practical writing or writing composition. And one of the assignments, one of the units in there is writing the college the Common App college application essay. And it's a great opportunity to really do that work in a very supported way, get some really constructive feedback from peers, from teachers, from school counselors. And that way, when you start the application process in earnest in the fall, one of the more stressful components is largely done. And we've had some comments or some questions rather about this. One of the nice things about hosting the night virtually like this, I know that we miss seeing everybody kind of personally, but this night is recorded and you can come back and click on this presentation and listen to all the silly banter that we all have, because we've all done this before, at your leisure. So it's not just live tonight and then it goes away. You can come back and rewatch anytime you want. I was searching for the link and just trying to see what was out there from past events that we've done, and I found the 2022 link for this. So I don't know. I didn't watch it, but it's there. So we have, I'm going to let our reps introduce themselves. And then we're going to get started with the questions. So it's kind of like, I don't remember the name of the show where all the square, like Brady Bunch. I'm going to start in the upper left on my screen. So Moses, or we have other nicknames for him tonight, with the nice dark suit and the dark lighting, very Godfather-esque. So we want to start in the upper left.
I would have gone with Hollywood Squares myself there, Russ.
Okay,
but,
Hollywood Squares.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Moses Murphy, Director of Undergraduate Admissions at the University of Vermont. I've been working in admissions at the university now for 19 years, and I spent a lot of time working specifically with Vermont students. Have had many geographic territories and different student populations I've worked with over the years, but primarily focused on our in-state residents throughout my career. So happy to be here. Can't wait to dive into any and all questions that folks have.
And looking up at Moses, Sam from Middlebury. Or Moses looking down on Sam, depending upon perspective.
Well, both of those things are true. I've spent a long time looking up to Moses, and I know he spent a long time looking down at me. Hello out there. My name is Sam Prouty. I'm the Executive Director of Admissions at Middlebury College. I've been here about 10 years and excited to answer any questions you all might have.
And to Sam's, or my right, Kevin.
Hi, everyone. Happy to be here. My name is Kevin Donahue. I am the Assistant Director of Admissions over at Champlain. Only been here a couple of months, but happy to answer the questions. Yeah.
And next is Mr. Kennedy.
Hello, everyone. I'm Brandon Kennedy. I'm one of the associate directors at Vermont State University, and I work primarily with early college and dual enrollment students. That's an area that I focus, but I've been in admissions for 10 years as well, and I've worked with a variety of students, and super glad to get to chat and see you all.
Brandon also has company in the same room as him, I think. So
I do. My daughter Dara, who's 5 months old, might chime into. She's going to censor me if I say anything out of line.
I'm sure she has better answers than I do.
Me too.
All right, and from St. Lawrence.
That just leaves me. Hi, everybody. I am Kirsten Larrabee. I am an assistant director of admissions here. And this is my 4th year in admissions, and I graduated from St. Lawrence in 2020. So happy to be here and answer your questions.
Excellent. And I didn't get a chance to say who I am. My name is Sarah O'Hare Hughes. I'm one of the counselors in the Chittenden House. I also wanted to mention before we get started with asking the questions that we have for the reps, that we will save time at the end for families and students to ask questions, and you can do that in the chat area on the YouTube side, or the right side of the YouTube. So if you have questions and wish to ask those, you can just put those in the chat section. We will try to make time for all of them at the end.
And one other announcement really quick. I think that I've actually interviewed most of you, except for maybe Kevin, for the School Counselor podcast in one capacity or another. And linked in the description for this particular YouTube broadcast is the CVU School Counselor podcast links to Spotify and YouTube, where I interviewed several current CVU seniors and a past student, just to talk about their time here at CVU, things that worked really well, things that maybe didn't work so well, advice they had. But there's roughly 40 different episodes out there or shows out there, ranging in topics from how do schools use standardized testing. We interviewed CVU teachers around writing the college essay. So there's a lot of valuable information out there for students and families around all topics that come out of the Direction Center, everything from scheduling to testing to you name it. We've probably had an episode on it. And if there's something that we're missing, feel free to email me and we'll put something together. So I think this is a quick one, usually pretty fun, and it gives some perspective on the work that these folks do for our students every year. I'm curious just to kind of give us a little bit of a round robin on how many applications you each personally read every year. Starting with Sam.
Tricky question. Probably 1,500, maybe a little more. That's partly because of my role in the office, so my eyes are on a little more. But the average for a person who works here is maybe 1,000, and so most of our people will spend 5 to 10 minutes on every file, sort of on average, and we try to get through each. We read in pairs of 2. Each pair reads about 65 a day.
Moses, you want to go next?
Yeah, so I spend much of my time, hours upon hours in admissions committee reviewing thousands of applications. Our top readers who do our first read, so the application will move through several cycles, including several different committees. But our top first readers will read around 1,500 or 1,600 applications. Again, like Sam, I spend most of my time in committee, reviewing sort of at the final stage, making those final decisions. But we spend many hours. We obviously receive, many thousands of applications, but we have a very large staff, a number of external readers that we hire seasonally, to help us with that load. And so, I think at the core of this question is, the amount of time we're able to spend with each applicant, and those applicants go through several stages before receiving a decision. At first read being that very first step of the process.
Kevin, I know you're new to the process. I'm curious what your role was this application season.
Yeah, so I would say probably close to about 800 for me here at Champlain. A smaller group of applicants each year compared to Middlebury and UVM. But it's different. It's always you read based off of your territory and the students in that area. So I have Northern Vermont, but it's also kind of the California, Pennsylvania areas that get more applicants. So it's really based off of where territory is.
Mr. Kennedy?
My role is a little bit different too, in that I work a lot with early college students. So personally this year, I will probably read upwards of 200 applicants specifically for our early college population, and that would be high school students that are headed into their senior year and going to enroll with Vermont State University. But the average reader at Vermont State University is probably reading anywhere between 500 to 800 applicants, and we read based a little bit differently. We read based off of academic programs. So some programs have a large influx of applicants and others have smaller. So, but on average, our counselors probably spend, a good 25 to 30 minutes on an application to try to really dive into it and get to know them.
My role is also slightly different. My main responsibility is organizing events. So if you come to visit for like an admitted student day or a visit day in the fall, those are the things that I organize. So I have a smaller population of students that I read for, and I'll probably read 200 to 250 applications this year. But I would say the average reader at St. Lawrence probably reads, I don't know, 3 to 4, 500, 600, somewhere in that few hundred range.
I think as our juniors move into the college search process, we at CVU use Naviance and have found it to be a pretty valuable tool for students to be able to compare themselves to former CVU students and where they have gone to school, and kind of looking at their academic profile and doing some comparing and contrasting, confidentially, of course, because names are omitted. But I'm curious if you all have other favorite tools, because I know not everybody likes Naviance or wants to use Naviance. And I'm just curious what you all in your world feel are resources that reflect institutions well. I've used Niche in the past. I haven't really used it too much, so I'm curious what all else you might recommend. I don't have to call on anybody.
Oh, anyone can chime in. Yeah.
I can go first. I think when I like to think about student enrollment, I think about an enrollment team for yourself as the student. And I think the first person who I want to go to, or who I'd recommend a student go to on their team, is their school counselors. I think they have a wealth of knowledge of different universities. They've known you likely, or they've gotten a chance to get to know you, or they've heard about your goals at least for your future. So they might be able to point you in the right direction, get you a nice list. I think College Board, I think Naviance, all of those tools are here to support you. I think another, great tool to use is your family members, community members, people who you trust, to give you an honest opinion of an institution. But then also, I think trusting yourself, doing a little bit of research on those search sites is great, but then going and visiting and actually getting a feel for it within yourself is really should be your driving factors, I think.
I see a lot of head nodding. Sam, you just unmuted and you had said that if you didn't have anything to add, you weren't going to unmute. So,
Well, the truth is, I actually don't search for colleges, right? So, and my children aren't old enough to do it yet. So I actually don't really know, frankly, which are the better search engines out there because I don't use them. I'm on the other side of that.
Other
But
side.
I will say any search, frankly, I don't like the ones that are just all, John Q. Public giving his opinion, which, no offense to John Q. Public, but he doesn't really know anything about this process. But I'm a big fan of any that help students expand their lists. So students and families out there, we all know that there are 25 or 50 or 70 sort of most famous colleges in America, right? So those are the ones that we think we know. And so if you love Middlebury and you've heard of us, then maybe you've also heard of Williams and Bowdoin and Amherst and, that group. To me, the search, so like I like the Fisk Guide as a book or any other search engine that would allow you to identify the traits, right? So what is it that I like about Middlebury? But now, what are the other schools out there, maybe the ones I don't even know about yet, that will give me a Middlebury-like experience that might not be, the most famous ones that all have a 9% admit rate, right? And so I think if you can use the searches to broaden your scope and broaden your lists, those are the best ones. I think the worst ones are the ones where some, random parent says, we took a tour here in July and, the tour guide had ugly shoes. So, we would never want to go to school there. That's obviously not helpful to you.
Right. This question may have had a little bit more relevance a couple of years ago during COVID, but I think it's still, we're talking about looking for schools and finding schools that have things that really resonate for you. And I think campus visits are a really important part of that. I personally encourage students to get on as many campuses as possible to determine, I would really like this, I really don't like that. So how do families go about scheduling campus visits with you all? And what do they currently look like? Are they in person? Are you still doing a lot of virtual campus visits?
I think to your questions of sort of the logistics of scheduling a campus visit, I think can be pretty straightforward. That could be as simple as going onto any of our websites, searching visit options, signing up online. Of course, you can go old school and call our office and schedule a campus visit. I think to your question about the format, born out of the pandemic, are a host of virtual options that can range. And what I would suggest, and really one of the benefits of those virtual options, I think, is a level of access that is provided either to those students who are resourced but don't want to fly across the country for a tour, or who are lesser resourced and can't fly across the country. But now that students have the opportunity to be in person, I think, Russ, to your point, that's really where the rubber hits the road. I think it's important as you narrow your list to get on the college campuses that you're interested in. I think of virtual options as being sort of on the front end of this process when you're kind of kicking the tires, trying to figure out the basics of what a school might provide or offer. Those can be virtual tours that are, done at your convenience. They're pre-recorded. It could be, virtual live programming such as this, where you can get information from staff members and current students and things like that. But I think at the heart of this decision is this sort of visceral gut reaction you get to whether or not a school feels right. And in order to get that, I think you need to, put boots on the ground, get on campus, interact with faculty, staff, and students. And so while out of the pandemic, the virtual space has provided a lot of benefits, I think core to this decision process is really getting on a campus and seeing what feels right.
I'd
I'll
also
just
like to
add that-
add,
Okay,
oh,
go ahead, Kevin.
yeah. So, I mean, I would say also just using the schools in your backyard. What's nice is, right here we have different schools, public, large, private, small, liberal arts. Coming to the campuses that are close to you, get an idea of what you like, if that's something you want to look for, and then kind of expand your reach out to other schools that have, once again, a similar vibe that you enjoy.
That's what I was going to add. So thank you. All right. So there's a whole list of questions, and I hate to do them all in order, but I think there's good information out there. So maybe we can do some of these a little quicker than others. Letters of recommendation. That's one of the things that I had a student in my office asking about them today. Who do you like to see letters of recommendation from, and how many should I get? And then as a follow-up, because we always talk about stories that we have heard from our positions as school counselors, from you folks as reps, in terms of how many letters of rec sometimes you read from a single student. Is it good or bad to submit more than the requested number of letters? We always encourage our students, if UVM wants 1, don't send them 10. So who do you like to see letters of rec from? How many should the student get? And do you like or dislike more than the requested number?
I think the letters of recommendation varies from school to school, which is an important part of when you're looking at colleges and deciding to apply, making sure that, you have what the school is requesting. A lot of schools, like for example, at St. Lawrence, we require 2 letters of recommendation from teachers that have taught you in the classroom in high school, and 1 letter of recommendation from your counselor. Not every school will require 2 teacher recommendations, but that's what we have. And we like that because we like to get a full picture of who you are as a student in the classroom from various teachers. We also welcome additional letters of recommendation, whether that be from coaches or employers or the person that you volunteer with down the street or across town or anything like that. We welcome those. I would say 10 additional letters of recommendation is probably a bit much. But 1 or 2 we'll read them. We read every single recommendation that you'll send us, but within reason, a couple is fine for us.
I think you make a really good point with like it can vary from school to school. So at Vermont State University, it not only varies from with school to school, but it varies from programs within the school. So many of our programs don't require a letter of recommendation at all anymore. They just require a transcript. But some of our more selective, more competitive programs do require letters of recommendation. So if you can get organized, I think you're going to find a lot of success with that. And, I would encourage you to think about a recommender who can really advocate for you, the good and the bad parts, right? Like life happens and not everyone's life is on a cookie cutter platform of, this, I earned straight A's all throughout high school. Maybe you were challenged in a math class and your grades don't reflect the effort that you put in. That's a great recommender to have, to explain a extenuating circumstance on your behalf, on your support. That's great. I probably wouldn't read 10 applications. I might actually, I might just, if you went through the effort to get 10 recommendations for an application, I might read them all. But 1 to 2 is probably like the sweet spot, I think, for many schools.
All right.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Next question. So many students feel a great deal of pressure to choose a major. Is it important for them to know what major they want to study? Is there a benefit to declaring a major from the start rather than entering undecided? And how easy is it to switch majors?
Multi-layered.
I'll start. The answer to almost every question about college admissions is it depends. And this is a classic it depends answer, because the Brady Bunch boxes on this screen, we might all give a different answer to that. So at Middlebury and at your typical sort of small liberal arts college, most students are not applying directly into a major. We really kind of don't even care what you think you want to major in. Research shows that students will often change halfway through anyway. But certainly there are other schools on this call and across the world where that is very much not the case.
And I would chime in on the other end of that spectrum, wherein at the University of Vermont, UVM is made up of 7 schools or colleges that fall under the umbrella of the University of Vermont, and students do need to apply to one of those 7 schools and colleges. And 5 of the 7 you can be undeclared, so you can know you want engineering, but you don't know which type of engineering. But you do need to select one of those schools and colleges, and a lot of it has to do with the different types of preparatory coursework you need to have taken in high school to major in these individual schools and colleges. So using engineering as an example, we're going to have heightened math and science requirements for that major versus something in our liberal arts college. But I would mention that students are not married to that throughout their entire career, so that you can switch from one school or college to another. You can major in one school or college and minor in another. So you do have the freedom to move around, but the university is an institution in which you do have to pick one of those schools and colleges. And if you are a student who either has no idea what you want to do, or you recognize that you have many interests that span a number of our schools and colleges, typically those students would start out as undeclared in our liberal arts college, and then through advising and experience select an academic path once they're at the university.
I don't see anybody unmuting, so we're going to move on. This is the next question. We sent our guests a list of the questions that we might be pulling from, and even though there's a rather lengthy school counselor podcast where I talk to Moses and Sam and Mr. Kennedy and others, I think we have to go into the world of test optional. I see Sam nodding his head. Everybody's nodding their heads. Can somebody on the panel define what test optional means, please? And then, because there's multiple parts to this question, we'll tackle them one by one. I'm going to call on somebody.
Test optional means test optional. It means truly that, if a school is test optional, in most cases, it means that you have the option to either submit standardized tests or omit them. And it's not going to affect your admission or your candidacy for admission one way or another, because it is an optional portion of the application. Now, in some cases, some scholarships require test scores, or some programs within a test optional institution might require test scores. I'll give you an example. For most programs at my institution, Vermont State University, we are test optional, and you do not need to submit any form of test scores. But for our nursing and our allied health programs, you need to take the AccuPlacer. And that is just so that we can make sure that you have the solid foundation in math and in English to be successful in our accelerated programs or our more competitive programs. So again, if you're organized with your application portfolio, you'll know which schools are test optional and which ones are not. I think because of the pandemic, many of us shifted to test optional and have enjoyed that, and our applicants have enjoyed that as well.
Can somebody define or bring some clarity to the terms holistic review process? Because I think, though, that test optional and holistic review are they go hand in hand, obviously, but I think sometimes families and students they're unclear what all happens.
I ask 3 questions. Who are you right now? Who are you in the process of becoming? And how might we help you get there? And if I had $1 for every time somebody asked me a very specific question, I could retire a millionaire, right? What, do I take AP chemistry or non-AP chemistry? And will that get me in? And how many hours of community service should I do? Is it 15 or is it 18? There is no one thing in a holistic review of an application that makes us say yes, or that makes us say no way. It is an overall sense. Who are you? What makes you tick? What are your academic accomplishments? What are the classes that you've taken in terms of the rigor available to you? And how much of that have you opted into? Who are you in your community? Who are you in your family, in your town? What is it that you're looking to do? What gets you up in the morning? What makes you angry? What frustrates you? Are you going to make us laugh if you're our roommate, or do you have a story that we need to understand? So holistic admissions really is it's just a get to know you exercise. Who are you? And so there are straight A students with perfect numbers who submit scores, and they're perfect scores, and they don't do that much outside of their academics, and they write essays that frankly are kind of dull. And those students might not get into their top choice colleges and the most selective colleges, and they're not going to know why, because they're going to say, I don't understand. My numbers are through the roof. Holistic admissions is, if your numbers are through the roof, you still have to be a really interesting person, engaged in your community, with teachers who say cool things about you, and an essay that makes us pay attention. Holistic admissions is, I have a couple of B's. Does that keep me out of the most selective schools? No, because maybe that essay makes me think or makes me cry, or maybe you're the mover and the shaker in your town or your community. I could go on and on for days about this, but in a nutshell, that's the idea, right? Who are you when you add all the pieces together? And then on top of that, is that a good fit for our particular institution and what we do?
Thank you. And going back to just whether to send scores or not, or making that decision when students have scores in front of them, they have the option at CVU, they have the option to take the SAT here at our school in the spring, and then they can choose to take it again. But then they get their scores, and often questions in our offices we get, well, are these good enough to send? And looking, so we look at the average accepted scores at each school when we talk to students, but we've definitely noticed, especially this year, these scores have seemed inflated, especially after COVID, because it seems that students with higher test scores are submitting, and then kind of that number seems to keep rising. I guess, can you speak a little bit about that and what would be, how students could make that decision whether or not to send?
I think kind of to speak to that and to relate it to Sam's point, the students that are submitting test scores often feel like that's a really shining star or shining point of their application. If they're really high, I did really well on a test, I want to let that college or university know that. And students who don't maybe test well are going to be a little bit more conservative with where they're sending scores to. And so I think to your point, Sarah, that definitely test scores have changed, and it's really understanding, I think a good question to ask a college or university is, how many of your students or what percentage of your applicant pool are submitting test scores? And where do I find myself? And also, thinking about yourself as a student, are test scores really reflective of your academic ability, or does your transcript, have the foundation to stand on its own? Is it really going to enhance your application or really be a differentiating factor of your application by any means by sending test scores? I always tell students who, maybe had a rocky start to high school. Maybe their freshman and sophomore year, they weren't even sure if they wanted to go to college. Those types of students, I encourage to think about taking the SAT, because it might be able to show what skills you've learned that you weren't able to reflect on your early first years of high school experience. So I think it's a tough question, because it's a case by case for many students. when I talk to students about the SAT or the ACT or any standardized test, I always tell students it's a snapshot. It's one day for 4 hours, for 6 hours, or maybe you take it twice, maybe 3 times at the most, but like your transcript is over 4 years. Your letter of recommendation is from someone who spent significant amount of time with you. Your essay is really your part of the application that's in your own control and you can tell your story. So there's a lot of other factors of an application I think that are more beneficial than SAT scores. So, keep that in mind when you look at averages for sure.
Thanks. That was really helpful.
All right.
I would add just quickly to that. I always tell students that like we are test optional, but if you do decide to send your test scores, they can help you or hurt you in the college process. So it's a really good idea to be thoughtful about where you're sending the scores. And if you're not sure, you can always reach out to your admissions counselor for advice at that, specific college. And like, I would always be happy to chat with students if they have questions about whether they should send their scores or not, and whether it will be beneficial in our process or not.
So I'm realizing that we asked our guests to be here till around 7 o'clock, and I'm realizing that we have already used about a half an hour of their time. And so I think there are some other topics of conversation that I'd like to get their thoughts on. And as a department, we watched most of the movie Anxious Nation today in our department meeting because students were only here for half a day. And I'm curious how campuses are meeting the needs of students or trying to meet the needs of students or not able to meet the needs of students who are identifying as anxious and maybe having some mental health needs, how that's happening, how that's being addressed on campus.
I can go for that one. I think with especially COVID and since then, students have become more open, but also have the resources on campus to get help for especially anxiety and things like that. And it's really each campus is different. Here at Champlain, we do have a counseling center, and you can see that pretty much across the country right now. The increase in counselors that are available to students on campus to speak with someone, at all times, so that you have those people kind of in your corner. As well as like a new thing with Champlain is, we have this new program called Champ 101, which we kind of call like an extended orientation. And that is a way for students to kind of have a smoother entrance into their time at college. And for each student that is looking at, the perfect school for them, those are the questions and those are the things, those resources that you should look towards, especially if you need it, because, the colleges have them. One of the big things that I always hear from our counselors on campus is we want the students to come to us. They sometimes don't know we're here. And that's not the best because we want the students to use those resources available to them. And that's a counseling center, but it's also a whole bunch of other offices on campus on all these different college campuses across the country. So just look for what you need, and reach out to the people who, you start day one, your orientation leaders, but also faculty and staff around campus to get the resources that you need to, be in the right space.
I think what I would add to Kevin's point and to emphasize it is that we all have these resources available, and they range in the types of services that are provided. I think what is key, and this is true in a lot of different aspects of going off to college, and Kevin touched on it, is this idea of being able to advocate for yourself. I think that there are a lot of students who would benefit from the breadth of services that we all offer, who don't seek them out and who find themselves in a precarious situation. And so, you know, this can happen with relation to mental health. It can be on the academic side of the house. It could be socially, you know, but we all as institutions recognize the importance of making these services available. But one of the things of going off to college is that you have to recognize when you need help, and you have to seek these services out. And they're everywhere on our campuses. But it's really important to you know, to understand yourself, to understand when you need help, to have open dialogue, you know, with your family and with your advisors and with your peers, and to seek those services out when they're necessary. And it's something that probably all students will access at some point. So it's nothing that students should feel ashamed about or should worry about accessing. But it's really important that when you need help, you seek that help out. I think that that's part of the sort of that growth that happens when you go off to college.
And I know that on the YouTube side, our audience can only see the person who's speaking, but we're all nodding our heads to what Kevin and Moses said. I kind of knew that the resources were all on campus. One of the things that we talk to students about is finding out what those resources are when they're doing their campus tours, so that they enter a campus tour or they enter into that application process knowing that those schools are going to be able to meet their needs or have the services available, but that the most important thing is that they reach out when they have need. They're comfortable talking to Sarah, or they're comfortable talking to myself. They need to find their people on campus and reach out to them when they have needs. I'm going to jump to my personal favorite topic. I think that the college essay is a wonderful opportunity for students to make a school pay attention to them. And I have a couple questions. Sarah and I have a couple questions that I think kind of we'll get our guests to speak to that a little bit. And hopefully we'll get some more humor out of this particular topic. Sam, talking to you. What is the key message to speak to in the essay, in your opinion, with on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the most important? How important is the essay?
I think the essay is the most.
The next question, I think, is Sam, the one where we talk about your favorite topic. So
You want, okay, I won't answer this one. I'll save myself then for the next one.
Don't steal my thunder.
I think it varies from institution to institution. At Vermont State University, part of our application, the essay has become optional for students. And for some programs, I should say, for other programs, it is required to, again, add some more depth to it. But in my personal opinion, every student should consider writing an essay and either submitting it or maybe omitting it, depending on how you feel it goes. But I think it's a great exercise on self-reflection. If I mentioned this earlier, the essay is your one part as an applicant that's totally in your control, that you control the story, you control the narrative, and you can be as creative as you want to, or you can be short. Now, I think writing a good essay is super important. Writing a mediocre or a poorly written essay is detrimental. So, you know, and now that our application essays have become a little bit of, have become optional for most applicants, I've seen a lot more essays that are on all sorts of different ranges. And the students who stick out to me are the ones who clearly took their time with the essay and did write really well, had it proofread, really took their time with it. And the students who send very short or disingenuous essays, I just wish they had omitted it. So.
All right. What advice would you give students currently writing their essays? I've read some essays recently where students intentionally and with borderline appropriateness, use of the F word. How would you advise students around sensitive topics? I think this is kind of, I saved this one for Sam because he has a nice little anecdote that he adds. But again, I think the essay is a really important topic or part of the application. So
I totally agree with what my friend Brandon just said about the essay being the main part where students, you have a voice that is purely in an unadulterated way yours. So sound like you, don't sound like anybody else, and don't sound like everybody else, right? And so if you're out there and you're the #1 cross country runner at CVU, and you won the big race last year against Middlebury Union, good for you. But you know what? Every runner who's ever won a race could probably write that. So write something that only you can write. Write something that will sound like you. And if your mother and your father and your school counselor and your private college counselor and your family attorney all look at it and they try to change the words, don't let them. It should sound like you. I know the difference between a 17-year-old and a 55-year-old. It's glaringly obvious. I know the difference between a young person's voice and a computer's voice. And so, make it yours, have a voice, be distinctively you. And I would also say, if you need to use the F word in your essay, if you are painting a picture for me, and somebody, said that word to you, you're walking down the street and somebody shouts an epithet at you using that word, then maybe you can justify it. Otherwise, you don't really need that kind of language, and you certainly don't need it just to make your own point about something. But I would say there's two things. There's content and then there's craft. The content is on some level less important than the craft, because you could write me a beautiful essay if you're an equestrian. You could write me a beautiful essay about being inspired by animals, about what it feels like to be one with an animal while jumping over those jumps. You could write to me how it's going to inspire you to be a vet. You could write to me about God's majesty in creating, nature. Or you could write me an essay that says, Pickles the horse is my best friend. I love Pickles the horse. I don't actually have any human friends, so thank God for Pickles. I see Pickles every day after school. I don't even mind it when Pickles poops on my hands because he's just my best friend. My life would be empty without Pickles. Okay? This is a terrible essay. That doesn't mean that writing about loving horses is inherently terrible. It's where content meets craft. And ideally, your content is interesting and your craft will let us really hear you and see who you are and hear your voice. And if you've got both of those going, then you're in a good place.
And again, students are going to have an opportunity to marry content and craft in their writing composition or practical writing classes here at school. So I find sitting in my desk, Sarah finds sitting in hers, that the students who really take that unit seriously walk into the application process with a really dynamic essay that does all of the things Brandon and Sam and anybody else would add to the conversation. All right, we've got 10 minutes or so left, and Gary, our tech, we couldn't do this without Gary. Sam, you touched on this a little bit. He's wondering about can you identify the use of AI in letters or in essays? Anybody? Moses, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I think Sam, touched on it, and I think it goes back to this idea that what the essay provides you with is an opportunity to add your voice to your application. And I think that the best way to do that is to be authentic. And I think that a lack of authenticity oftentimes will come through in an essay. That's particularly true if it's being AI generated. And so what I tell students is, can we identify it? Sure, sometimes, and perhaps sometimes we cannot. But what you have done is you've lost a significant opportunity by not adding your authentic voice to your application. And so if you're going to try to take that shortcut, you are taking the risk that we're going to identify it and hold it against you in our process. But I think more importantly, you've missed an opportunity. And it's the opportunity that we have provided for you to really benefit your candidacy. And so what I say with 100% certainty, we're always going to identify an AI generated essay. No, we're not. But you have significantly, I think, put yourself at a disadvantage and take an unnecessary risk in the case that we do identify it.
Thank you. We wanted to pull from one of the audience questions already. It seems like it would be a good question to ask all of you. What do you think about dual enrollment courses? Given that all high school students in Vermont are eligible to take 2 dual enrollment courses free of charge. What do you think about those? And yeah, the question.
I can speak to it because this is the population that I work with all the time, and I love it. I think dual enrollment is a great opportunity, and I like how you mentioned, Sarah, that every Vermonter has the opportunity to do it. Now, is it right for every single Vermonter? Probably not. To be honest with you, it is dipping your toes. Dual enrollment is great because it's dipping your toes in a very controlled way into the college experience. You're not biting off a whole semester's worth of curriculum. You're challenging yourself academically, or maybe you're taking a class that you have a little bit of extra interest in, and you're getting a feel for what it's like. So I think it's a great opportunity. Now, I think, all of my colleagues here on the call will, we all probably look at dual enrollment credit a little bit differently. So, if you're thinking about dual enrollment, what I would encourage you to do, in addition to exploring, is it the right option for me personally? Am I going to be successful in taking this class, whether it's, anatomy and physiology so that I can get that foundation into pre-health or nursing? Or is it a ceramics class because I've always loved pottery and my high school doesn't offer ceramics? But making sure that you can complete the course to the best of your ability. But then also asking maybe some institutions that you have interest in, how they view dual enrollment. Some colleges and universities will welcome that credit. Some will have certain thresholds that you'll need to meet to make sure that you can transfer that credit in. And other colleges and universities might say, you know what, we'd rather see you take AP because AP is standard across the board. And so, all of those answers I think are really valid, and I think they're fair answers to receive. But I think as a student who's going to do dual enrollment, you should know about those answers and hear from your schools. But definitely think about it. One thing I always encourage students, one last point about dual enrollment, is that you can take a wide range of dual enrollment classes. Oftentimes students think about stereotypical dual enrollment as, I have to take anatomy and physiology, or I have to take English comp because I'm gonna need to take that class to graduate in my degree. And, it's gonna save me money in the long run. And it might in some cases if you're really strategic, but in most cases, if you are truly just taking using your 2 state dual enrollment vouchers, you're likely not going to graduate early. So take a class that you're interested in and that you actually want to take. Don't just take that class that's going to fulfill a graduation requirement for a program you might go into, because life can change. So, think about taking classes that are actually fun for yourself.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to move on to the next question. So this is the first time we've actually asked this question on our panel here. Burlington and other communities have all seen an uptick in violence and seen images that are upsetting. What are your campuses doing to work with communities to make sure students are safe?
Well, being, I think Champlain, Kevin, you can also speak to specific to the Burlington community, but the university has its own police force that coordinates with Burlington police to ensure that our students are safe. We have the Cat Safe app. This is an app that sort of piggybacks on the blue light system that you've probably seen at many campuses that students can use. In addition to indicating when they are in danger, has neat features where their roommate or their parent from anywhere in the world with an internet connection can watch them walk from class to class or from downtown back to campus or what have you. And so there's I think a real partnership with regard to student safety between the university and the city of Burlington. Recognizing that we want all of our students to be safe, both those students who live on campus residentially, but also students who live in the Burlington community. And the UVM police force, does patrol the downtown areas where students are most often living and things of that nature. And then again, I think it's about providing resources on campus to help students make smart decisions about what they do to ensure that they're putting themselves in situations where they can expect a safe outcome. So I really think of it as a partnership, both with significant resources dedicated on campus, but then also that coordination with the city with regard to safety.
All right, couple more audience questions before I let you all author your final comments of the evening. I'm curious, quick round robin-ish. What percentage of Vermont students attend your institutions?
At Middlebury, I think it's about 5. We would love it to be higher. If you live in Vermont and you want to, have a great going away to college experience, you don't actually have to go away. You could just make an agreement with your parents that they won't show up here unannounced and, embarrass you in front of your friends. You can make some agreements. Don't discount. Look, Vermont has the highest per capita amount of education in this country. Vermont was the place in this country where public education was actually invented. So Vermont is an education state. Don't discount a school just because it happens to be close by. You might be missing out on a great opportunity.
At Vermont State University, we're probably 65% Vermont students. So, we are really focused in Vermont and serving Vermont students. That's a huge part of our mission, to provide affordable, accessible education all throughout the state. And we like to say we are Vermont. We have 5 residential campuses in all the corners of the state, from southern Vermont, where I'm located, to the Northeast Kingdom, we have learning sites all over. So we are Vermont. So we have a lot of Vermonters that attend.
Moses, I know you all just had your EA and ED kind of acceptance period. How many Vermont students in that pool?
Yeah, it's funny. Sam mentioned per capita. Vermont's a small state, so Vermonters only make up 7% of our applicant pool. There's only 5,000 high school seniors in the entire state of Vermont, and only half of them are going to go on to college. So there's only about 2,500 college-bound seniors in the entire state of Vermont. 20% of all college enrolled Vermonters attend the University of Vermont. Overall, 35% of our student body are resident students. But to Sam's point, for those of you who are looking to go to college, very much encourage you to look at schools within the state of Vermont. I also speak to those of you in the audience who are maybe considering foregoing higher education. I think that is one of the interesting things about Vermont is we boast one of the highest high school graduation rates in the country and among the very lowest college-bound rates in the country. So about half of our high school graduates are not going to pursue higher education. And so that's the audience that I want to speak to and very much encourage you to look at any of the fine institutions that are on this call, but that are throughout the state. And really try to pursue that secondary credential, whether that be at a 4-year institution, trade school, or otherwise.
I want to skip to some more audience questions really quick. Sam, this one is really quick and it applies to specifically to Middlebury. What division is Middlebury baseball?
3. All sports are Division 3 at Middlebury, except for squash and skiing, because there is no D3 in those.
There's a audience member who has a question about letters of rec from alumni of institutions who know that particular child well. It says, what about letters of rec from alumni who know your child well?
We
Yes,
accept
no?
those. Yeah. If there's an alum that wants to speak to characters and qualities of the student, yeah, absolutely. We'll welcome those.
Are they rated more highly because it's an alumni who's been on the campus, knows what the expectations are, and can kind of put the situation in that environment? Or is it a letter of rec is a letter of rec? It's a lot of
Yeah,
sideways head moving.
I think there is an additional layer of,
Okay.
they know the school and they know the environment and they know, maybe if the student will be a good fit or not. But I mean, also a letter of rec is a letter of rec. It's another few paragraphs that is talking to the qualities that the student has that might make them a good fit for our school.
Okay. International students, do they need to take the TOEFL?
Our rule on that is if an international citizen has received a high school education in English, then they do not need to take the TOEFL. If the international student has received an education in a language other than English, then they do. But if
Okay.
you're an internet, I mean, you're not going to have any. I don't. Maybe you have this scenario on your call. So, like somebody who grew up abroad or is an international citizen but is going to CVU, then no. Or an international citizen at a boarding school in America, no. But if you're French and went to school in France and you speak French at school, then yes.
Yeah, we often have some of our exchange students want to stay in the US and go to school. Is there an advantage to applying ED or EA?
Meaning early decision or early action?
Well, I'll go. We have ED at Champlain College. I really recommend it for students that have a specific major that they're really interested in, especially our most competitive majors, specifically game design. Those are the ones that fill up, and those are the ones that students want to be kind of first in line to get those spaces. There's always advantages to ED, so just look at the school. You need to make sure that that's a place that you can see yourself going, because it is a binding agreement at most colleges.
Yeah, I would. If you really like somebody, would you rather have them ask you on a random hookup, or would you rather have them ask you for your hand in marriage? That's ED, right? If you love a school, early decision is the marriage proposal. I love you. I've seen all the others, and you are the one for me. And a binding early decision agreement is the way that you communicate that to a college. And so, yes, it can be to your advantage. Early action has less skin in the game. Maybe Moses can speak to early action because I know UVM does a lot of business in that realm. That's not binding, but can still be a wonderful option too.
Yeah, not much to add. Same thing. Early decision at UVM, you're going to have a slight advantage because of that commitment that you're making up front. Early action are for those students who want to receive early notification of a decision, and it is outside of that binding arrangement. So I think as it was said, early decision is a commitment. It has to be something where that a school is going to be not only a good fit for you academically and socially, but financially. For those students who want to make that commitment, it's a great option. There is a bit of a thumb on the scale, if you will, but the majority of Vermonters are going to apply to the University of Vermont early action, receive that early notification in December, and make their decision by May 1st.
All right, I'm recognizing that we're a couple minutes over, which I'm grateful for everybody's time. Any parting comments that you all have? Things questions we didn't ask that you think have important information that people need to know? Wait, we have one question from the audience. Do schools typically grant less merit money if applying for ED? Moses is shaking his head. We can't hear head shaking, but Moses is shaking his head
Sorry.
no.
No, the students would be, the parameters for both merit and need-based financial aid do not change, based on application type.
And Sam is agreeing. Everybody's agreeing. All right.
You bring up something important, Russ. So super quick, you mentioned merit aid. If you're out there, make sure you all know the differences in financial aid options. Middlebury, for example, does not give merit aid. We give only need-based aid, and we meet the full need of every student who comes to Middlebury. This is very different than merit aid. It's very different from schools that do not commit to meeting full aid. So we don't have time for that now, but definitely go out there and start Googling terms about need blind versus need aware admission. What is merit aid? How does that differ from need-based aid? Familiarize yourself with all that vocabulary because it's super important as you think about the financial piece.
And there was a college financial aid night with Naomi and Carrie Harlow from VSAC that should have a link on the CVU events tab for these YouTube presentations. And there was a lot of information in there about financial aid. And if you have questions about financial aid, I regularly refer my families to VSAC. I think it's the place to go for accurate, timely information about the financial aid process, and they're there to help Vermonters. So any parting comments, thoughts, words of wisdom? More prose from about Pickles the horse from our panelists tonight before we thank you and sign off for the evening?
I will chime in with the college search process is a really important process. If this is the direction you think you're going, there's a lot of options and it can seem very overwhelming, perhaps at first, but just take it day by day and step by step. And eventually, once you submit applications, get decisions back, you will eventually end up at a college, and you will get there. So just trust the process, talk to people, your guidance counselors, your parents, talk through the process, because that, lean on your support system, because that's what's gonna get you through this. And we as admissions counselors are here to help ease some of those anxieties throughout this process. So you can call us, email us with questions. There are no dumb questions in this process. It's our job to help clarify things and demystify college and the process for you. So reach out to us, lean on your support, and we're happy to help wherever we can.
Any other thoughts from the collective here?
I feel like I've talked too much tonight. For that, I apologize.
Never, Sam.
But I do have something I want to say, and that is, this is supposed to be fun.
Yep.
Have fun. This is your life, and it's your future. And I know it's stressful, and oh my goodness, do I submit my tests and all that stuff. At the bottom line, right, this is a process that is not about us, and it is not about trying to please us or figuring out what we want. This is a process about you and what you need and where you're going. And every tour you take is going to be different. And every college has a different personality and might fit you in a different way. So go into it open-minded, have a lot of fun, and look at it as matchmaking rather than, oh my goodness, I have to convince them that I am the person I think they want me to be. It's not about that. Have a good time, get to know lots of different schools, and believe it or not, this can be quite a bit of fun.
I'm glad I'm not the only one who thinks it's fun. All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. I recognize that yesterday's weather events left some of you without power, so I'm grateful you found ways to still be with us tonight. Apparently Darla slept through the night or the presentation, so maybe you'll be up all night because she slept through this. So thank you guys. I appreciate it, and we'll talk to you next year.
Thanks, everyone.
See you guys.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Is there anything else I need to do, Gary?
Nope. I hopefully did